Hi, Shaz, Nawaz here, and this is our next episode of Property Tax TV. And I'm here with Josh. How are you, Josh?
Yeah, I'm very well, thanks. How are you?
Very good, thank you. Very good. The weather's been good recently, so that always cheers me up.
Yeah, same here. It's cooled down a bit now, which is good. A bit more comfortable, but yeah, certainly since no one's going on holiday this year, having a bit of sunshine here definitely makes a difference.
Well, I've seen a few posts on Facebook and elsewhere, people asking about holidays. Somebody was asking about going to Dubai in August, and the general consensus was it's going to be too hot. Avoid it if you can. But
Yeah, it's especially I think if you do go on holiday, you have to travel with a face mask on. They're doing reduced service, and I think that it's just not very nice. It's not a fun experience to have to do that. So it's a no from me on that one.
so you're saying the perfect holiday for you and me is either Skegness or Constantin, yeah?
Yeah, it's what capital allowances can we get on a caravan?
Yeah. Well, both those places are local to us, aren't they? Localish. Yeah.
Yeah.
So today we're going to talk about some of the potential things to think about or the structure to think about when going into a JV, because in property, a lot of people do think about either going in partnership, but more often than not, they either start as a JV business and then move into a partnership, or they try the JV business and stick to that, or they try it and it doesn't work. So, what's your view on JVs and the way that those deals should be structured?
Yeah, I suppose really it's all about each party having clarity on what they're bringing to the table and what they expect to take back out. So a lot of the time when I'm speaking to people, it might be they just bring an investor on board and they say, "Oh yeah, let's do a JV, let's do a JV." But realistically, all that investor wants is to put some money in and get a fixed return. So in that case, it's not really a JV. You're just borrowing money from an investor. But quite often, it's used to be a limited company seems to be the way to go for everybody. You can just set it up. Each person has a different share classes. It's quite clear who owns what, and you've got the flexibility there as well. If you have a group company, that each party can take their dividends without worrying too much about tax. What are your thoughts on that?
So, are you saying you have one company with different classes of shares for each JV partner?
Yeah, so yeah, it doesn't have to be different. It depends on your structure, I guess. If you've got a group company, you don't really need different classes of shares because most people they're gonna, if they've got profits at the end of the year, they'll distribute those out and continue on as normal. So if you've got a group company that holds those, there's no tax to pay on those dividends. That's fine. But if you do have two JV partners going into one limited company and you've got different income requirements, one person might want to take up more dividends, then certainly that's when the share classes and getting those right from the start is going to save you tax.
Yeah, absolutely. So, having those alphabet shares to give people flexibility, of course, is one option. The other, of course, is, as you've just alluded to, is both parties. If there's two, there could be two or more, of course, but let's just assume that there's two parties that could use their own existing SPV or limited company. So, and if they've got an existing holding company structure, they could use that holding company to own their shares. So let's just say if you and I were to do a JV, you could use, and if you've got your holding company right now, and we're both doing 50-50, for example, you could use your holding company to own the shares in that SPV. I could do the same thing. So that's another possibility people might want to explore. You might not have a holding company or another limited company. So what we could do is, for example, I could have my holding company own my 50% of the shares, if it were 50%, and you could directly own 50% of the shares if you wanted to, and you can still obviously have those alphabet shares. So that is another possibility that I think people should explore. And again, it depends on how sophisticated the business is and how long people have been in business for. Because one thing in property is if you're doing deals, especially if you're into developments, conversions, buying land with or without planning and then developing it, or looking at different property strategies like service accommodation, rent to rent, deal sourcing, so on and so forth, then you're going to end up with quite a few different limited companies. And some people don't like that at the start.
We do. It's good for our accountancy fees.
Well, people usually think that I say do that just for some accountancy fees, and of course that I can see where they're coming from. But there's 84 other reasons, for example. When I say 84, I'm exaggerating, but there's a number of different reasons why people should do that. And I think obviously as trusted advisors, our fees should never be the priority and never are the priority. I know you're obviously joking, but ring fencing those deals is important because we know things do go wrong in property. Everything from something going wrong with a lender to a JV partner, for example, with a contractor or something else happens where you've got issues. So ring fencing everything just makes a lot of sense. So that's why people end up with quite a few different companies, but it helps them because I don't know about you, Josh, but I've seen the other side of it. I've seen people have everything in one pot and then something goes horribly wrong and they lose the whole lot. And they've worked, let's say 15, 20 years and they've got a lot of property in there, let's just say £5 million worth of property, just to make up a figure. And something goes wrong and they lose the whole lot, and they could have had, say, 4 companies. So was it worthwhile paying an accountant 4 lots of accountancy fees over those many years, or was it worth losing the £5 million worth of assets? Well, the answer is obvious, isn't it? So you've got to mitigate risk. So that's another option. Any other thoughts you've got?
Yes, certainly. I suppose even just on the benefit of having different companies, there's so many more, even including, touching back on the potential exit of a JV. So if it's perhaps a development or something that's got a shelf life to it, having that right structure in place could essentially mean that the funds go back up to your holding company completely tax free. Which, having that right structure, speaking to somebody first, gives you a lot more money in the pot to basically go again. So that's certainly something to make sure that you've got in mind and know exactly what your exit strategy is, because you don't want to go into a JV with somebody thinking that you're going to sell the units and then you want to keep them. It's all about everybody being on the same page.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, if somebody wants another option for a different structure, then they could have a mixed partnership where they've got, for example, a limited liability partnership with a limited company. That's another possibility. Again, it needs to be explored. Above and beyond that, 2 parties could just go in, do a JV together. I think it's important to note that I think sometimes people get mixed up with this, is doing a JV, generally speaking, by definition, is where you work on one particular project. Doesn't have to be property, can be anything, by the way. And I think sometimes people assume that a JV is a partnership, and a partnership is a very different thing to a JV, because a partnership continues, where a JV, you could work with somebody on one particular development, if we're talking about property, and then it could come to an end. So it's even more important, as you've said, Josh, to think about, if it comes to an end, how are we going to exit and how are we going to get our money out? And that obviously depends on the motivations of the individual. So again, going to the example of you and me being in partnership, you might say, once I've done the deal, I want the cash for myself because I want to buy a house or go on holiday, buy a car, pay off my mortgage, whatever. And I might say to you, I want to recycle all of the profits after tax to invest in the next deal. So we've got different motivations. So we've got to make sure we set up a structure so that it works for you and it works for me. Because no 2 people, generally speaking, are going to have exactly the same future plan. So therefore, it's important to have that flexibility. So again, mixed partnerships should be explored, and ordinary partnership should be explored, and LLP should be explored, because I think that's a very useful animal as well. Not so well used in the world of property, but more and more people are using it now. So that should be explored. And again, the basic plain vanilla having a limited company be it as some form of a holding company structure or the individual shareholders who also end up being the directors directly owning the shares. So I guess the point with both of us are trying to make is there are different routes, and it's important to explore those in light of A, where you are right now, but B, more importantly, where you want to be at some point in the future. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of start with the end in mind. So especially if you're just getting started or it's early days still, kind of anticipating where you'll be in 3 years time when you might actually get the funds back and realize the profits, so that you're in the best position there to actually use them. But aside from the kind of tax and structuring aspects, there's quite a few other considerations, isn't there, to take into account when going into business somebody or even a JV. It's kind of interchangeably. It's all about protecting yourself and having a good shareholders agreement or a JV agreement or some kind of legal framework. What are your tips for people around that, and what, at the very least, would you put in one just to make sure that everybody's covered?
Yeah, I mean, that the first point you make is extremely important in the sense that if you've got a limited company and your shareholders have a shareholders agreement, if your JV partners have a JV agreement, if you're in partnership, have a partnership agreement. And I find it interesting that people talk about going into a JV, and let's say they're buying a property for £300,000, they're going to convert it into flats. The GDV is going to be, let's say, £1.3 million. Okay, so we're talking big numbers here, and yet they'll say, I don't really want to pay, say, £1,000 for a JV agreement. And you think that's one of the most important documents you can have for both parties, and yet you're saying you're trying to skimp on that. So the point I'm trying to make is it's an important document, and people should not skimp on professional advice, be it from lawyers, accountants, and other professionals, architects, quantity surveyors, because all of those, if you use a good one, they will save you more money than they're going to charge you in the long run, for sure. So in that JV agreement, you want to have clarity in terms of roles and responsibility, who's doing what. You also want to have clarity in terms of if something goes wrong, okay, what's the next step or action points in terms of mediation or how you're going to fix things. There should also be very clear exit clauses in terms of what happens when people want to exit. That's extremely important, and I find sometimes people miss that in a JV agreement. So those are some of the things in what is usually a pretty detailed JV agreement. So I've seen JV agreements which are 5 pages long, which are fine if that suits people. And I've seen JV agreements which are 45 pages long. So I guess the reasonable and a standard JV agreement should be somewhere in between those two numbers. But I don't think we should be counting the number of words or pages. The JV agreement should be as long as it needs to be to cover all of the points. Because when you do have an issue or a problem or a challenge or a concern, and you're not too sure what to do, of course you can't cover every single thing in a JV agreement, but you should cover at least most avenues, angles, and potential issues, so that in 6 months' time, when you're unsure, you can go back to the document and say, let's see what we agreed at the start. So those are some of the basic things I think people should have in a JV agreement, including obviously if you want to profit split, and if somebody's on a salary or doing extra work, what they're going to get. Using your example, if somebody's investing their own funds, what kind of interest rate they're going to get. You don't need to have these things in a JV agreement, but while you're sat there and doing it, I'd say cover all of this so there's crystal clarity. Because usually when things go wrong, it's either one party thinks they're doing more, or the other party thinks that the other one isn't doing what they're supposed to do, and things start going wrong. And when everybody's making money, everybody's happy, hunky-dory. A few mistakes are made here and there, nobody is bothered. When things don't go too well, which, as we know, in business happens often, that's when you start having problems. So you need to plan and prepare for those things and cover them in a JV agreement. What are your thoughts on that, Josh?
Yeah, certainly. So I think a JV agreement or partnership, whichever kind of form you go down, whichever way, it's a great opportunity for everybody to get clarity, to everybody to have a look and actually think what they want to achieve from this, because it's so easy to think, oh, okay, yeah, great, I found an investor. I've not got any money myself, for instance, so you might say, oh, I found an investor. That's fantastic. You kind of jump into things, you get on the high of it all, and you don't actually think things through. But taking the time to speak to a solicitor to get an agreement properly drawn up, it gives the opportunity for all the parties involved to actually think, hang on a minute, what am I doing here? Get that on paper. It might be they've got halfway through it and they think, hang on a minute, we want completely different things. I'm lending you £100,000, but I want cash flow. You'll want to stick it in a property for 25 years and there's no exit involved. So it really gives everybody the opportunity to see what everyone else is thinking. So I know a lot of people that haven't done it. 6 months down the line, people aren't doing what they were supposed to be doing. One person might be doing more work than the other, and then they're basically trying to get out of it, but then they've not got a shareholders agreement, so they've got frustrated shareholders who own half the company, and that's a very awkward situation to be in for everybody, especially where you've got a business that's trading and making money, and the costs involved to rectify that at a later date significantly outweigh what it would have cost to get a good JV agreement from day one.
So what you're really saying, Josh, is if you think accountancy advice or having two companies is expensive, you want to go to a lawyer when you fall out in business with a JV partner and you haven't got a JV agreement. Is that when they rub their hands?
Yeah. I've never seen such an excited looking solicitor before.
Yeah, but you're right, it's costly. And then to rectify that at whatever hourly rate times a high number of hours usually, it's going to cost you a lot more. And of course, when you get to that point, either one or both parties are so aggravated that they're not thinking rationally, they're thinking emotionally. And when you're thinking emotionally, generally speaking, from my experience of having seen people when they act emotionally, especially when they're upset or angry, they tend to make more mistakes. So they're going to end up paying a lot in terms of legal fees. I mean, I was joking about the fact, obviously, solicitors rubbing their hands, but the legal fees are going to be pretty high. So you're going to end up spending £25,000, £30,000 or more, depending on how far you take the case, for something which, as we said earlier, might have cost you, let's say, £1,000 ballpark figure to get sorted up front. So it's money well spent.
Yeah, I'd certainly agree with that. So I guess to wrap things up, what would your I'll do mine after yours. What's your kind of key tip for somebody? One key takeaway in terms of what to think about or what to do off the back of this video if they're setting up a JV or going into partnership with somebody.
Well, if they're doing it on their own, I think the most important thing for them would be to write down exactly what they want to get out of the deal and why they are doing the deal, and then do the same, or get their other partner, JV partner, to do exactly the same thing, so they can compare notes and then see how they can make that work for both parties. And the second one from thereafter would be, once you've done that, seek professional advice, because these deals do go on and people do make a success of it. So you want to make sure you start as you mean to go on. Therefore, seek professional advice, because people who want experience are going to miss something somewhere, and the job of a professional is to point those blind spots and then help them cover those. So those two things: have clarity on over what you want and what your JV partner wants, and then seek professional advice to get everything drawn up properly.
Yeah,
and yours?
Yeah, absolutely. So I suppose off the back of that, that's certainly a key one for everybody to take away. And then after you've done that, make sure that you know what you're going to be doing in terms of the numbers. So have a proper kind of budget or forecast put together that you've both had an input on, so you know exactly what money's being spent, where and when. If partner A wants to go buy a brand new laptop or something and you don't quite feel happy that's a good use of your money, make sure you hash that out at the start. And additionally, having this kind of forecast, even if it's a trading business or property business, gives you the opportunity to see where you're going to end up from a kind of funds in for a forecast point of view, from cash flow. so that you can actually feed this back to your accountant to see what kind of entity you should be in. So if it's depending on the numbers, a partnership might be better, or a group company, or a LLP. Having that kind of forecast and knowing where you're going to end up from a finance point of view, feeding that back in so you get the right structure from the start. That'd be my one.
Perfect, and that's good advice. We hope you found this video useful. If you have any questions, comments, queries, put it in the comments below, and either Josh or I will respond to those questions for you. If you're interested in property or you're already in property, then both Josh and I have Facebook groups. Josh's Facebook group is Property Tax Secrets. Mine is in Trust Property Tax Experts. Join both groups, share your knowledge, ask questions, get involved. There's plenty of people in both groups, and you'll both be able to share your own knowledge, experience, and expertise, but you'll also be able to learn from others. So we look forward to you joining those groups. And if you're already part of the groups, ask questions and interact, because that's one of the best ways to learn. And until next time, bye for now.
Right.